Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. After the great feast of Pentecost, the church calendar plunges us into that long season of the same name. Some traditions call this ordinary time, but in some ways it's anything but ordinary. A much more accurate framing might be, as I heard one preacher express it, the growing time. This is the time when we pause from commemorating the recorded events of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and take time to listen to his actual teachings. To help us in that growth, readings throughout this season draw our attention to and instruct us on what it means to be a Christian. These early months especially teach us our basic duties. Then we progress toward our growing responsibilities to both God and our neighbor, read actually the whole world. And finally, as we approach Advent and the beginning of the new year, the season gives us a vision of the new life with our risen Lord. It's important to remember, however, that in this season of Pentecost, it is to help us live and grow in our Christian life in the present, not just the world to come. That's why, beginning with Trinity Sunday and these early weeks of the growing season, we've been hearing Jesus' own instructions to the 12 about discipleship, the lessons and patterns of life the Lord would want us to practice to care for ourselves, for our neighbors, and for God's world. At this point, we're still in the early stages. We're in the introductory coursework, as it were, and Jesus is our direct tutor. Throughout this 10th chapter of Matthew, Jesus has been teaching the first 12 disciples what discipleship is all about, both the gifts and the costs of this new life's work. It started on Trinity Sunday with the Great Commission to go and make disciples of all nations. The following Sunday, we backtracked a little, with Jesus choosing the 12 and then giving them their primary assignment. Proclaim the good news that the kingdom of heaven has come near, cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. Pretty heavy stuff, especially for beginners. Last week, though, he outlined some of the downside. There will be a cost to this discipleship. There may be divisions, even from those closest to you. You may not be the most popular person around the neighborhood. And most important, and it's not a halfway thing, you have to give it and Jesus your all. This week's reading returns to a little more encouraging message. Jesus assures the 12 that while there may be setbacks, some people will respond to their message and will be rewarded in due measure. There will be people and places where the good news they bring will be received with welcome, and they may even be offered refreshment in return. So what could be bad after a message like that? Well, the first lesson we heard today may give us some hints. The Jeremiah reading warns us that the context where we're singing and the cultural interference can make for challenges. Jeremiah was prophesying in the middle of a Jerusalem being overrun by invaders and people being taken into exile in Babylon. The prophet Hananiah was trying to take the bright side, claiming the exile would only last 2 or 3 years, and then everybody would get to come home. Unlike Hananiah, however, Jeremiah saw that the exile would be very long, and it turned out to be 70 years. So how do you tell a real prophet from a misguided one? Easy. History. Whoever's prophecy proves most accurate. Jeremiah turned out to be the true prophet in this case, and his advice to Israel was the best guidance they could have asked for. Adapt to the new normal, but never forget your own God. In the end, the exiles followed Jeremiah's advice and both survived and thrived in exile, preserving their scriptures in written form, creating new forms of worship and new ways to sing the Lord's song, even if it needs to be done in a foreign land. Our time is a little like Jeremiah's, isn't it? Crisis certainly isn't unique to Jeremiah's situation. For the present, we're facing challenges as we try to sing the Lord's song. Some people are comparing these times to a form of exile. The COVID restrictions have forced us away from our church homes for a time and requires we create or rediscover forms of worship and fellowship that will work both in exile and after we return to our buildings. The violent deaths of innocent people and the struggle for greater justice demands that we examine our assumptions about people and society and use this time to create new ways to live together. Jesus, like Jeremiah before him, prepared his disciples to meet these times of rejection and even crisis that may inevitably come. These crises do happen all around us, but the good news of the kingdom of heaven is always here with us. So keep practicing your discipleship. Proclaim the good news. Feed the hungry and serve those in need. Tell your story of how God has been active in your life. And though you may never know who will respond, Jesus' promise of a richer life in God will bless not only you as a disciple, but any others who hear and receive the good news. Amen.